For centuries, millions of people have opened the Gospel of Matthew and read the same familiar words. Blessed are. But what if those words, beautiful as they are, cause modern readers to hear something more passive than the ancient Semitic expressions suggest? Behind the Syriac-Aramaic tradition of the Beatitudes stands Tubwayhun, pronounced Tubwayhun, blessedness, flourishing, a favorable state of being. And when we understand this word differently, abundance begins to look less like something we wait to receive and more like a way of living that changes how we respond to what has already been placed before us. Today, we will uncover 7 abundance shifts, one at a time. The final one will reveal why the teaching of Jesus about blessedness was never simply a promise of material wealth, but could completely transform the way you experience scarcity, opportunity, resources, and in the first shift, from waiting for blessing to living blessedness. For generations, the Beatitudes have reached English-speaking Christians through the familiar expression, blessed are the. Canonical Gospel of Matthew itself survives in Greek, where the Beat commonly translated as blessed, fortunate, or happy, while the Syriac Peshitta preserves these teachings in an Aramaic family language through forms such as Tub. That historical distinction matters because we should not pretend that a recently discovered manuscript gave us a secret recording of the exact Aramaic syllables spoken by Jesus. What we do have is something genuinely valuable, an ancient Syriac tradition that allows us to hear these teachings through a Semitic linguistic world much closer to the everyday Aramaic environment of Jesus. And now the mystery begins. Tubwayhun, Tubwayhun, blessedness, flourishing, a favorable state of being. For Jesus, Aramaic was part of the ordinary linguistic world of Galilee. Hebrew remained important in Jewish religious life, while Greek was widely used throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. But Aramaic belonged naturally to everyday communication for many people in his environment. That means hearing these teachings through Aramaic-related language can restore shades of meaning that a single English equivalent cannot always carry. Ancient sacred speech was also experienced through breath, rhythm, repetition, memory, and communal recitation, making words something heard and embodied rather than merely analyzed on a page. This does not mean that pronouncing Tubwayhun magically changes your bank account or biologically activates hidden DNA. Its practical power comes from what the word can force you to examine, the internal condition from which you are living. Consider the difference. If blessing exists only outside you, your attention continually asks, when will I receive more? But if blessedness describes a condition you are being invited to inhabit, the question changes. How would I live today if scarcity were no longer controlling every decision? That is our first abundance shift. You stop postponing your inner state until external circumstances become perfect. This is striking when we return to the Gospel of Matthew. Chapter 5. Jesus calls people blessed whose circumstances do not look prosperous according to conventional standards, including the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, and those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The pattern immediately challenges a shallow definition of abundance. Blessedness is not being presented simply as possession. Something deeper comes first. And once you recognize that, the second shift exposes the invisible habit that can keep someone feeling poor even when resources begin increasing. The second shift, breaking the scarcity mind. Scarcity is easy to recognize when something essential is genuinely missing, but the scarcity mind is more complicated. It can continue operating even after circumstances improve, because it has learned to interpret almost everything through insufficiency. There is never enough time, enough money, enough opportunity, enough recognition, or enough security. When something good arrives, instead of experiencing it, the mind immediately asks how long it will last, or what might take it away. This is where our reading of Tubwayhun becomes practical. If blessedness can describe a flourishing orientation toward life, then abundance begins with the ability to recognize what exists without denying what is still needed. This is not pretending that bills disappear or that financial hardship is imaginary. It is refusing to allow lack to become the only lens through which reality is interpreted. A scarcity-controlled person may encounter an opportunity and see only the possibility of failure. Another person may encounter exactly the same opportunity, recognize the risks, prepare responsibly, and still notice what could be built from it. The difference is not magic. It is perception followed by action, and this matters financially, because fear influences decisions. Persistent scarcity thinking can encourage avoidance, impulsive choices, excessive comparison, or the belief that one breakthrough must solve everything immediately. The teaching we are drawing from Tubwayhun interrupts that pattern by returning attention to a different question: what is already in my hands, and what can I responsibly do with it? Perhaps you have knowledge that has never been developed, an ability you continually underestimate, resources that could be managed differently, or an opportunity you have dismissed because it appeared too small. Abundance often begins before multiplication becomes visible. It begins with recognition. The second shift therefore moves you from "I don't have enough" to begin toward "What can I faithfully do with what is available now?" This does not guarantee immediate wealth, but it does something more useful. It restores agency where scarcity had created paralysis. And that prepares us for the third shift, because recognizing what you already possess is not the same as being capable of receiving something new. Many people pray for expansion while unconsciously resisting the responsibility, uncertainty, and change that expansion would require. The next Beatitude principle will expose why receiving can be more difficult than asking. If this teaching already feels this deep, imagine having a full guide with deeper explanations of Jesus' true teachings in Aramaic. You'll find the link to the study guide in the comments. In the third shift, we move beyond scarcity into something most teachings about abundance overlook completely: your capacity to receive without fear, guilt, or self-sabotage. The third shift, learning to receive. And the best is yet to come. In the next chapters, you'll discover what could change everything for you. Because escaping scarcity does not automatically mean that you have learned how to receive what enters your life. Some people ask for opportunity and retreat when responsibility arrives with it. Others desire greater financial stability but feel uncomfortable charging fairly for their work, accepting help, recognizing their own value, or stepping into an opportunity larger than anything they have handled before. This creates an invisible contradiction. Consciously, you desire expansion, while internally you remain more comfortable with what is familiar. The limitation is no longer simply what you lack, but how much change you are prepared to receive without returning to old patterns. Here the Beatitudes offer a surprising image through the meek, because meekness should not automatically be confused with weakness or passivity. The teaching overturns the conventional assumption that only aggression, domination, and constant competition led to possession. Receiving requires another kind of strength: enough humility to learn, enough patience to prepare, and enough inner stability to accept an opportunity without allowing it to control your identity. This is where Tubwayhun, blessedness, flourishing, a favorable state of being, returns with deeper meaning. Flourishing is not merely acquiring more. It includes becoming capable of carrying more without losing your values, peace, or direction. Think of abundance as water entering a vessel. If the vessel expands responsibly, it can hold more. But if it remains fractured by fear, impulsiveness, or insecurity increasing the flow, does not necessarily create lasting abundance. The third shift therefore changes the question from "How can I get more?" to "Who must I become to responsibly receive and sustain more?" That question prepares us for the next gate, because receiving is only half of the abundance equation. What comes into your hands must eventually be directed, protected, cultivated, and used with wisdom. And this is where the fourth shift reveals why having more resources does not necessarily mean possessing greater abundance. The fourth shift, stewardship, before multiplication. Imagine two people receiving exactly the same opportunity and the same amount of money. Several months later, one has transformed those resources into greater stability, while the other has returned to the same condition of uncertainty. The difference may not have begun with how much they received, but with what happened after receiving it. Abundance without stewardship can disappear almost as quickly as it arrives. This is where the hidden path we are building through the Beatitudes becomes practical. Inner blessedness is not an excuse to ignore material responsibility. Instead, it should influence the way resources are treated once they enter your hands. The scarcity mind asks only how to obtain more, while stewardship asks what should be done with what already exists. One focuses constantly on arrival, while the other understands preservation, direction, patience, and purpose. This principle extends beyond money because time, knowledge, relationships, abilities, and opportunities can also be wasted or cultivated. When you begin treating what is already present as something worthy of attention, your relationship with abundance changes before your circumstances necessarily change. That is another dimension of Tubwayhun. Flourishing is not simply the emotional sensation of feeling blessed. It becomes visible through the quality of the choices that follow. You begin noticing unnecessary financial leaks, neglected abilities, opportunities that require preparation, and resources that could be directed more intentionally. Instead of waiting for one dramatic breakthrough, you start strengthening the foundation capable of sustaining future expansion. This does not mean every responsible person will become wealthy, nor does it turn the Beatitudes into a financial formula. It reveals something more enduring. Receiving and managing cannot be separated if abundance is expected to remain. The fourth shift therefore moves from multiplication as fantasy toward stewardship as preparation. Before asking what could increase tomorrow, you examine what today's resources reveal about your habits. Right now, you might be asking yourself, why am I only discovering this truth now? Don't worry, we thought about that. We're here to help you go deeper with a guide made for this journey. The link is in the comments. But the next shift is where this teaching becomes uncomfortable, because even excellent stewardship can be sabotaged by one powerful emotion. In Chapter 5, we confront the fear that makes people cling so tightly to security that abundance can no longer flow through their lives. The fifth shift. When fear controls your money by the fifth shift, we have moved from waiting for blessing into recognizing resources, learning to receive, and practicing stewardship. Yet all four can be weakened by one powerful force: the fear that whatever you have today could disappear tomorrow. Financial fear can make a person hold everything with a closed hand, but it can also produce the opposite reaction. Anxiety sometimes drives impulsive spending, desperate decisions, constant comparison, or the search for a dramatic solution that promises to eliminate uncertainty overnight. Neither extreme produces genuine peace because both allow fear to make the decisions. The deeper question is not simply how much money you have, but how much authority money has acquired over your inner state. This is where the Beatitudes challenge conventional ideas about prosperity. Jesus does not describe blessedness as the reward reserved for people whose circumstances are completely protected from uncertainty. He repeatedly places blessedness within conditions the world would not naturally associate with success. Through Tubwayhun, blessedness, flourishing, a favorable state of being, we encounter an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps inner abundance must become strong enough to remain present even when external circumstances are still changing. That does not mean ignoring bills, avoiding planning, or pretending financial problems do not exist. It means allowing wisdom, rather than panic, to determine the next responsible action. When fear loses absolute authority, money returns to its proper place, as a resource rather than an identity, a master, or a measure of human worth. You can plan without worshiping security and pursue growth without believing that more money will solve every inner conflict. The fifth shift is therefore not about becoming careless with money. It is about becoming less controlled by the fear surrounding it. We are just scratching the surface of this ancient power. Get ready, because in our next video, I will reveal even deeper Aramaic codes that unlock spiritual authority you've never imagined. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss this unfolding revelation. And now we reach the sixth shift, where abundance stops asking only what can enter your hands and begins asking what can move through them. The sixth shift, the paradox of generosity. There is a strange paradox surrounding abundance. The person terrified of having too little can become obsessed with keeping everything, while the person who develops inner security becomes increasingly capable of giving without experiencing every act of generosity as a threat. This does not mean giving away money you need for essential expenses, nor does generosity function as a transaction that forces God to return more money. That interpretation would reduce a spiritual principle to a financial bargain. The deeper transformation concerns relationship. Scarcity says that whatever leaves your hands makes you poorer, while mature abundance recognizes that resources can also create value through what they accomplish. Money can support a family, solve a problem, develop knowledge, help another person, build something useful, or create future opportunity. Generosity, therefore, extends beyond currency. Attention can be generous. Knowledge can be shared. Encouragement can restore someone, and an opportunity can sometimes be opened simply by connecting to people. When the internal world changes, the question is no longer merely, how much can I accumulate? It becomes, what good can responsibly flow through what has been entrusted to me? This is where Tubwayhun reaches beyond the popular language of manifestation. Blessedness is not simply attracting more toward yourself. Flourishing includes becoming capable of creating value beyond yourself. And something important happens psychologically when you practice responsible generosity. You repeatedly teach the scarcity mind that not every release represents catastrophe. While learning that security does not have to depend upon controlling everything you possess, the sixth shift moves abundance from accumulation towards circulation, but always with discernment and responsibility. Now only the final shift remains, and it overturns the entire journey, because the greatest abundance principle hidden in the Beatitudes may have very little to do with acquiring something you currently lack. It begins with recognizing what has been governing your definition of enough. The final shift, from having more to becoming more, we began with a familiar phrase, blessed are. Then we returned to the Syriac-Aramaic Tubwayhun and discovered that the Beatitudes can invite us to think about blessedness as something deeper than waiting passively for favorable circumstances. Now the final shift brings every previous chapter together. If abundance means only having more, there can never be a final destination, because every increase creates another level available for comparison. Someone will always possess more money, influence, recognition, comfort, or opportunity. The scarcity cycle can therefore survive prosperity itself. The final shift occurs when abundance stops answering the question, how much do I have, and begins transforming the question, who am I becoming through what I have? That is why the Beatitudes remain so disruptive. Jesus identifies blessedness in people the surrounding culture might bizarrely overlook, demonstrating that human flourishing cannot be reduced to visible status or material accumulation. Through our reading of Tubwayhun, blessedness, flourishing, a favorable state of being, the path becomes clear. Recognize what is present. Receive without self-sabotage. Manage responsibly. Refuse to let fear govern your choices, and allow resources to create meaningful value. This does not guarantee instant financial gain, but it creates something far more sustainable, a relationship with abundance that is not entirely dependent upon the next external result. Begin each morning for 7 days by speaking Tubwayhun slowly 3 times, not as a magical formula, but as a reminder of the state you are choosing to cultivate. Then ask yourself one question: what is already in my hands today that I can use wisely? Before the day ends, take one concrete action. Organize an expense. Develop a skill. Complete neglected work. Acknowledge an opportunity. Save intentionally. Create something useful, or practice responsible generosity. Repeat the pattern for 7 days and observe what changes, not only around you, but within the way you perceive what is available. Just a quick reminder, the transformation guides for a fuller life are waiting for you, right there in the comments. Before you leave, if this message touched your heart or brought new understanding into your life, write the word restoration in the comments below. Your testimony may encourage someone else who is seeking healing and renewal. Perhaps the hidden abundance lesson was never about forcing heaven to give you more. Perhaps it was about becoming capable of recognizing, receiving, cultivating, and wisely using what life places within your reach. Thank you for sharing this moment of ancient wisdom with us. Until the next revelation, walk in peace, walk in freedom, and walk in the flourishing truth of